Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. I have these live streams alongside videos. If you prefer shorter videos, I have a video tab that you can go ahead and tune into. If you prefer more in-depth talk and analysis and an open space as well for the community, then these live streams are for you. In this live stream, I wanted to talk to you about an offer that Benjamin Netanyahu had for the PIJ, which is the second largest Palestinian armed resistance movement that began fighting Israel even before Hamas. And what that means. Firstly, this leak came out from the Deputy Secretary General of the PIJ. His name is Muhammad al-Hindi. And I wanted to share this video with you of him, and I'll translate what he says because I didn't have an English translation, but I'll translate what he says as he speaks really in this live stream. He had a podcast, and this was a part of the podcast. And this is
نتنياهو بشكل شخصي اتصل في مسؤول الأمم المتحدة وطلب زيارته إلى القدس.
Netanyahu personally asked someone in charge in the UN, asked him to go to Jerusalem.
تقابل معه في القدس هو وفد المفاوضات وقال أرسل.
And he met with him alongside the negotiating delegation, the Israeli negotiating delegation that is supposed to conduct the negotiations with Qatar and Egypt and the United States, with Hamas, who are doing what? Who are representing all of the Palestinians when it comes to the negotiations. He asked them, when they came to Jerusalem, send a message to the leaders of the PIJ, in short for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Send a message to their leaders.
برسالة إلى قادة الإسلامي أنه مستعد ليفتح حوار مع الإسلامي من أجل التبادل.
That he is ready to open a direct negotiating path with them for the exchange of prisoners.
جاء هذا المندوب الأممي إلى بيروت طلب مقابلة الإسلامي. قابلوا أحد إخواننا.
And this UN official senior figure came to Lebanon, asked to meet with one of the leaders of the PIJ, and Muhammad al-Hindi is saying that he met with one of their representatives. He met with one of their representatives in Lebanon after Benjamin Netanyahu asked this UN official to go and speak with them directly.
حاضر من قبل نتنياهو مستعد أن يفتح باب التفاوض.
And he's saying that Netanyahu is ready to negotiate with you
بشكل منفصل طبعا مساق منفصل.
separately from the other negotiating path, and I'll tell you all of the meanings of that.
منفصل. نحن أغلقنا الباب مباشرة وبلغنا موقف الحركة.
He's saying that the movement immediately shut the door on this attempt. The PIJ shut the door, said we're not negotiating with you. And we told them the position of the movement when it comes to the negotiation.
إنه هذا ملف وطني سير مخولة.
That this is a national case and Hamas is given the authority and leadership to negotiate.
بالتفاوض. أيضا هناك دولة إقليمية حاولت في نفس هذا.
And there was also a regional country that tried to convince the PIJ to negotiate with Netanyahu. And when he's saying a regional country, he means an Arab country.
وأغلقنا الباب مرة أخرى.
And they closed the path once more. What does that mean? Okay. Well, firstly, Benjamin Netanyahu is struggling, clearly. Benjamin Netanyahu is struggling to reach a deal with Hamas. He is trying to open these different paths. Clearly, Hamas, when it comes to the negotiations, they've given Benjamin Netanyahu a really tough time. They're giving him a tough time because they're not submitting to his demands. Netanyahu wants everything to go in his path. He wants to continue bombing people and killing people and release Israelis at the same time. Hamas, they've had the same position ever since the temporary ceasefire ended, because they didn't want to put the Palestinian people in the same position they were in previously. They were hopeful there's a ceasefire, a bit of relief, more aid coming in, we're finally over and done. And then all of a sudden Israel goes and signs the restarting of the war and the ending of the ceasefire. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, did that at the time. He went and signed the ending of the ceasefire. Israel did that, not Hamas, because there was an agreement, including from the mediators, including the United States, to do what? To extend the temporary ceasefire 3 days at a time in return for an exchange both from Hamas and Israel and the continuation of the ceasefire. But Israel wanted to continue killing people. And Hamas, from their perspective, ever since that time, they said, we are not going into a temporary ceasefire ever again. We're only going for a permanent ceasefire. Phases, how many released, how many not released, what's going to happen at this phase, what's going to happen at that phase, all of these things, they'll talk about them, but not the concept of having a full permanent ceasefire, because the Palestinian people deserve to have a ceasefire. These people have been suffering for so long, and they are going through a genocide and depravity and barbarism. So clearly, he didn't specify the time, by the way. This is one thing that he did not specify the time. But this interview was very recent. This was from 6 days ago, and they did not submit this information previously, meaning it's most likely very recent. Okay, what does that mean? Well, firstly, for you to understand what that means, you need to understand the difference between Hamas and the PIJ. Firstly, the PIJ was formed as a movement before Hamas, and they joined the armed struggle against Israel 1 year before Hamas. But they have the same ideology. They have the same ideology, same concept, same beliefs, and they have been in a strategic relationship. Different, of course, leadership, but they have a strategic relationship. The only key differences that they had is the PIJ did not participate in the elections after Israel withdrew from Gaza. They had a different approach with Syria when the Syrian revolution that later started to become a civil war started to happen in Syria. And they also have slight different positions in general to Hamas when it comes to certain political matters, but in general they have a strategic relationship with them, not a tactical relationship, a strategic relationship. They sometimes had escalations that were separate, for example, from Hamas in Gaza, and fighting between Israel and the PIJ broke without Hamas interfering. But again, you're talking about generally strategic relationship, same concept. Okay. They started fighting Israel before Hamas. You're talking about the same ideology, and they are still labeled as a terrorist organization, right? By Israel and by some countries too, the genocide cartel countries, the minority acting like they're the international community. How comes Benjamin Netanyahu is offering to talk with them directly? What does that mean? Well, that means you're willing to talk with people who are fighting you. People who are fighting you. So these people, they did not participate in the elections in 2006 because they believed that, no, other parts are still occupied. Israel is still killing the Palestinian people. We shouldn't be focused in politics now. We should be focused on resisting them. No, thank you. Okay, Netanyahu is approaching them. Wow. Okay, firstly, a move of desperation. He's desperate because he's not getting what he wants, meaning Hamas are in a powerful position and they are not giving up the key demands for the Palestinian people. Secondly, you're willing to talk, Netanyahu. This is something we've been saying for a very long time, by the way. Netanyahu, so long as it serves him, he will talk with Hamas and he will make a peace treaty with Hamas if it suits him. If it suits him. But so long it doesn't suit him, he will make them out as if they are the baddies and they are the worst people on earth. You've been allowing money to go into Gaza under the leadership of Hamas for years, for a decade, over a decade even, right? So he's willing to. That's the second thing. Okay, so you're willing to talk, but you're acting like you're not going to talk with Hamas, and you're acting like, mediators and apply pressure and don't apply pressure. Why not? Open a direct conversation with them, right? And try and reach a deal. Okay. No, he doesn't want that. Another thing, an attempt to divide the Palestinian people, to divide the Palestinian movements. And if they tried previously so much, and even in the Israeli media, to have divisions between Hamas and the PIJ. That failed miserably time after time. And here we go. It fails again. It fails again. And what does that show you? That's the final thing. It shows you how strategically tied the Palestinian resistance movements are with regards to Gaza and when it comes to confronting Israel. And by the way, both Hamas and the PIJ, they have the same approach when it comes to the Palestinian scope in general, talking about movements that are hand in hand with like secular movement and national movements fighting Israel. All of them are together. And Israel approached the PIJ because they are the second largest group in Gaza immediately after Hamas. They have a lot of capabilities. But again, all of their operations in Gaza, when they are fighting Israel, they are in coordination with Hamas, and they are in coordination with the other resistance movements in Gaza. So, a desperate attempt that failed. What does that leave to Netanyahu, and is he trying other things? So, the door of trying to apply pressure on Hamas through genocide isn't working. Through destruction, it's not working. Through occupying new location in Gaza, not working. Through grabbing all of the American firepower to the region, not working. Trying to apply pressure on the mediators, in particular Qatar and Egypt, it's not working. To a level where they started to cause problems with Qatar. They started to call them so many things in the media. You are supporting terror. Even though they were allowing them to do everything yesterday, they were allowing them. They had a representative Qatar in Gaza. They were channeling all of this. And Qatar, of course, they don't just mediate when it comes to Israel. They mediate with other cases with the United States. So the United States administration considers them to be a strategic country. But even now, they're criticizing them more, and they have an even bigger problem with Egypt. They have a bigger problem with Egypt because Egypt, not only that they're not applying pressure on the Palestinian negotiating team, they are telling Israel, no, they have full right to tell you to withdraw, and you cannot remain here. Why? Because firstly, you initially said limited campaign. All of a sudden, we're a year in. You're occupying more territories. You're breaching international agreements. Of course, from the Egyptian perspective, you're breaching the Camp David Accords. We are seeing this as a security threat. And we will not recognize your presence here, and we will not deal with you. Why? Because they had an option to deal with them. They had an option to deal with them ever since they occupied the Philadelphia corridor. But they told them, we're not negotiating with you. We're not dealing with you. We will only deal with the Palestinian side. Which side? From the Palestinians, they need to agree. The Palestinians need to agree. So that failed. The pressure failed. Then they have this desperate attempt to continue. And again, that failed. Netanyahu, all of the doors are closing in on him. Now he's worried about this movie being published about him and his corruption in Israel. Even when he tried to force the High Court in Israel not to publish the movie, no. They said, no, the movie can be published and it can be shown. The last thing that he needs now, we just witnessed the biggest protest in Israel, approximately 750,000 Israelis, 500,000 of which in Tel Aviv. So you're talking about 8% of the Israeli population, so almost 10% of the population. That's a large number. Everyone is criticizing him internally, resignations from the army. he's trying desperate things, and this is a massive show of desperation and weakness from Israel to try and speak with another movement, and it's also undermining all of the negotiations that are happening. Why? Because the mediators will look at Benjamin Netanyahu and tell you, well, we've been spending a year trying to get this sorted, trying to only get a ceasefire agreement, and that's not happening. And now you go and you try and speak with other people who are included in the negotiations. So he's undermining the Americans, he's undermining the Qataris, undermining the Egyptians by doing that. And this man clearly stated it, that it was a UN representative. So he was trying to speak with someone not involved from the negotiations. You understand? So he didn't go and speak with an American official, for example. He went to the UN thinking that he might get away with it and some people won't know, and we will try and reach an agreement with them. But again, that didn't happen. That was the first thing that I want to talk to you about. Secondly, we've been speaking about the fact that the situation is escalating between Israel and Lebanon. Yoav Gallant went to the Lebanese borders yesterday or the day before, and he told his troops over there that we're deploying more forces and you need to be ready for the time of action. I told you this time is about to come. It's almost here. So you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared. That's not intimidating. That's not intimidating Hezbollah. Hezbollah are still continuing. Today, they published the videos of them. We won't publish them here. A platform doesn't like it. Of them targeting Israeli bases and Israeli settlements, but they mostly focused on bases. Some of these bases are bases with destroyed parts, meaning that even when they attack these bases and they destroy parts of them to do with radars or cameras, detection, whatever it is, they are still operative. The people are still operating there. They showed an image of this something flying and recording, and then a drone going in and exploding. So they're viewing it permanently. Soldiers down there. Drone goes in and targets them. So they are looking at the bases permanently without being detected. How? I don't know how. And then they're targeting them because they're still there. This is a thing because some people argue that, they're hitting bases they already hit. What are they doing? It's just a show. Clearly, from what they published today, they're still active, even though parts of them are destroyed. So Israel still needs them. And what did they also show? They showed that Israeli troops are using civilian cars, not army cars, civilian cars. Talk about being disguised as civilians, or hiding, or whatever it is. And they launched approximately 100 missiles on Israel today. We still had back and forth attacks, but it's intensifying and they are increasing the reach. There is one sign that something is still happening when it comes to the negotiations. What's that sign? So in the past period, we saw that Hamas were not negotiating. That's their official position. That hasn't changed. But what's new is they're sending a negotiating delegation for indirect talks, as if they are not directly involved, but we're listening. We're listening. Led by who? Led by a man called Khalil al-Hayya, who is a leading figure in Hamas. He is saying that, no, we haven't added actually new conditions. Some people are saying we added new conditions. We haven't added new conditions. And we are willing to negotiate, but we have our conditions, our core conditions: complete withdrawal, complete ending of the war, so you cannot restart the war, and we need guarantees. Allowing all people in to move freely, allowing all aid in, and rebuilding Gaza, and of course having a prisoner exchange. So that means Hamas are a little bit more engaged now. Not that they weren't engaged before, because even though they were negotiating with themselves, the reports were going to Hamas. Because Hamas was telling them, there's no point in us being present there, but if you have something to bring to us, fine. Which is a position that is understandable. Why? Well, because they accepted a ceasefire before. They accepted a ceasefire, and they officially accepted a ceasefire once, and then they showed a very positive approach towards multiple other proposals, especially the one that Joe Biden came out and spoke about in July. As a matter of fact, now they're saying, well, go back to Joe Biden's proposal. Go back to Joe Biden's proposal and go back to the UN Security Council resolution. Why do we have UN Security Council resolutions for? That the people agree upon? Or are they just ink on paper again, like other UN resolutions calling for Palestinian statehood and right of return and hailing and supporting the armed resistance? What is this? What is it? Some kind of a joke? Okay, that's new. But, of course, Israel is still led by Netanyahu, who is doing what? Who's worried now, who's worried, but he knows that he's enabled. As so long as the American money and American weapons come, it's fine. You can talk as much as you like, so long as I'm getting my weapons and billions. Okay, nothing to worry about. They're telling him, oh, we're applying pressure. Please, Mr. Netanyahu, do this, accept that. Biden might call him and swear at him or shout at him. We've had so many leaks, but you're sending him 20 billion. So he's like, okay, call me, swear at me, yil'an abuk in English or whatever it is, and I'll go and participate in this facade of a negotiation. And thank you so much for the money, for the 20 billion and 30 billion and 40 billion and 50 billion. And the MK-82, 83, and 84, and the one-ton bombs landing on innocent people in Gaza. Thank you very much. He's not worried. Why should he worry? Nothing to worry there. So, whilst there are signs that something is kind of happening, it's not really happening. It's not really happening. We will only see something genuinely happening when we have a declaration. We don't have a declaration. People are losing hope, really. And Netanyahu, again, it's not like he cares. 800,000, unless there's like a military coup or something against. That's the next step in Israel. There are people who don't like him. Problem with that is they know that you're talking about that's it, the end. Rest in peace. Why? Because everyone is armed and infighting, and that's the end. So I think many people realize that in Israel. That's why they don't want to do that. But again, that's costing them their lives for the sake of a person, for the sake of a political career for Benjamin Netanyahu. So they're losing their people. As a matter of fact, when this helicopter collapsed yesterday, they had this helicopter that was going to evacuate some people who were wounded from the Philadelphia corridor, called the Yanshuf. Yanshuf means owl in Hebrew. Why? Because it has night vision. Crashed. Israel admits that 2 died and 4 critically wounded. All of the comments in Israel blame Netanyahu. More people dying, more soldiers dying, because he's continuing this war. And how long has that been happening? Now, that's been happening since April. Since April, when we had the first report of the Israeli delegation accepting a ceasefire in principle, and only Benjamin Netanyahu rejecting. And by the way, he could have had a deal before, by the way, but at that time he was acting even more recklessly with the negotiating delegation, banning them from negotiating, preventing the head of the Mossad from going to Qatar, telling them you can negotiate, but you can't reach a deal, sending his representatives with them to make sure they don't do things that he doesn't want. And now, there is more pressure. There are still attempts, but in my opinion, these attempts will fail continuously and miserably so long as the United States is still sending money. What are you talking about? And you have certain moves from certain countries that are good, but not enough, of course. The UK, they stopped, they didn't approve about 30 licenses. Okay, good, but continue. Again, not enough, continue. Then you had Canada now implementing the banning of the arms ban that they had on Israel back in January. Other countries too. All of these things are good. They need to be, of course, implemented in a very, very thorough manner, of course, to make sure that there are no loopholes. But there are movements, but the United States still support. The key thing is the United States. It's not Europe. It's not Canada. Because whatever these countries send to Israel is negligible in comparison to the United States. The United States, you're talking about the country that calls the shots. You're talking about a country with 750 bases across the world. They're controlling Europe by force, by bases. How many bases do they have in Germany and in other parts of Europe? So they're calling the shots. They are dictating what's happening. So long as they are still supporting, Netanyahu is still there, and he's still continuing. This is what I want to share with you. Let me open the space up for the community. See any questions, any comments. If you have any questions for me, by the way, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them, just so I don't miss them, because we'll usually miss stuff in the comments. But thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Thank you for joining again for this live stream. Thank you so much for everyone who's sending supers, the virus. Thank you so much. And Jalal Hassan, thank you so much, my friend, much appreciated. And 1984 Sarajevo, thank you very much for your supers and for your support. Kate, Jordanian truck drivers who bring food, vegetables to Israel and nothing to Palestinians are being arrested, beaten by the IDF. Are they still delivering food to Israel? If yes, shame on them. Well, after this attack by this Jordanian truck driver, where he killed 3 Israeli security officers, they stopped the trade. I spoke about it in a previous video. Now Israel is increasing the embargo on itself. How? Well, you have an embargo from Yemen. You have an embargo from other countries. And more countries are cutting ties. The external stuff, so the boycotting, the divestment, and the sanctions that are happening individually, okay, alongside the arms export, stuff like that. But if we're just talking about economically, it's a devastating situation, primarily from Yemen's embargo. The lifeline was coming from Jordan. And now they stopped that because of this man's attack. Meaning they are only relying on what they can get in from the ports in the Mediterranean, because the Red Sea, it's almost impossible. It declared bankruptcy, the port of Eilat. So they still have other ports, of course. They'll try and do stuff through them. But by land, where are you going? Nothing is coming from Egypt. Jordan has the biggest borders. Definitely nothing coming from Syria and Lebanon, apart from rockets and drones and whatever it is. What are you going to do? It's an even bigger catastrophe now, because don't forget, some people think that the external boycott on Israel is the main thing. No. The internal boycott. Half a year ago, top financial figures in Israel and leaders of like economic unions and business people in Israel who sit on billions sent an open letter for the government. And they told them that you can't continue down this path. You're hurting the economy. We're unable to bring investments, because don't forget, it's not just about what's happening now and people cutting ties with Israel. It's blocking potential money coming in. So if you're a company, you were thinking of doing something in Israel and seeing everyone leaving, oh no, thank you, I'm not going to go and invest money with you. I'm going to go somewhere else. So don't forget that. Including internal funds in Israel, businesses taking their money out of Israel, again, to a level where they had to dig in for the first time in the national reserves. So you're talking about really bad situation. And yeah, so they're not still delivering food. They are not still delivering food, but we'll see if that gets sorted. Now Netanyahu is talking about a wall. He's talking about a wall. He had a video on the Jordan Valley, and he was saying, these are our biggest borders. We have very good ties with the Jordanian government. However, we need to protect ourselves. We need to protect ourselves. Don't forget the maps that he's showing, like some of you mentioned when he was showing this map on this video. No West Bank. Of course, no West Bank, because they don't consider anything Palestinian. They don't recognize the people. The imposter squatting cabal and cartel, they are denying the existence of the indigenous people. How bizarre. But he's saying, no, we need to have a wall. We need to have a wall in Jordan. Well, good luck bringing anything in. Well, good luck bringing anything in. Is that downgraded by credit scoring companies, facing an embargo, in denial, in denial. Why? Again, the American money. The American money, that's what's making the difference. And thank you for that. And Francis, thank you so much for your super, much appreciated. Gullyberg, Mahmoud, do you see Hezbollah launching the big missiles at the Zionist entity when the IOF invades Lebanon? I think Hezbollah, as they have been calculated so far, they will continue to remain calculated. They don't act based on emotions. They don't act based on like a lust for vengeance or hate. Hezbollah, they act in a calculated manner, and they consider many things. They consider the type of attack. They consider not taking away the attention from Gaza. But they already warned Israel, civilians with civilians, destruction with destruction, strategic places with strategic places, electricity with electricity. So expect all of that if Israel attacks that in Lebanon. And usually Hezbollah, when they warn, then they follow their word. But again, you need to understand how they operate. They operate in a very calculated manner. That has been evident ever since the 7th of October. Firstly, they immediately entered to something they weren't necessarily planning to go into. They had no clue, but they heard the call of the Palestinian people and said, okay, fine, we will participate, of course, because they don't just use Palestine as a slogan. They believe in the case of Palestine, and they know their enemy. They know the country that invaded them and committed massacres in Lebanon, and Qana massacre, and in Beirut, and the gangs that they used to operate in Lebanon in the civil war, and the massacres in Sabra or Shatila under the eyes of Israel and by the authority of Israel, and the thousands who were killed by Israel. They know them, an occupying, expanding force. So they participated. I think they will be very calculated, personally. I don't think they're going to like break all of the tools, and they would take it step by step. They would see where Israel starts, and they would respond accordingly. And you will see a gradual increase, if that makes sense, in the escalation, if we would be looking at an Israeli invasion. And look, Israel's threatening with an invasion. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how they're going to do that. They've had 3 failed attempts. They invaded Lebanon and they came back in caskets. What are you going to do with that, really? And again, their recent attempts, 3 since the 7th of October, they failed miserably. They failed miserably. And Kate, what are the changes Qatar and Egypt want Hamas to change? Why should Hamas compromise? Well, I don't think Qatar and Egypt are trying to change Hamas. They're just playing their role as a mediator. What does a mediator do? A mediator tries to reach a common language between 2 parties that are fighting. Like, okay, Hamas, you want this, Israel, you want that. Can we agree on this? If Israel wants that, can we agree to delay it? If Hamas doesn't want that, can you accept part of it? This is how it operates. But listen, even the American administration are saying that, expecting to apply more pressure on Hamas from the negotiating delegation is unrealistic. Why are the Americans saying that? Firstly, because they need them, primarily Qatar. But Egypt is very important to them as well for its strategic location and strategic role. Egypt is a strategic pillar as a country to the region, and it has lots of things that are important globally, primarily the Suez Canal, but also in terms of stability. And they know if something happens with Egypt, everything in the world is going to go, all the trade is going to go, all the oil, everything. But with Qatar, the Americans need them. Like, the Americans can't put the Qataris in a situation where, like, you have to, and try and force them to do stuff. Because Qatar tells them, well, look, I'm dealing with you. We had a dealing with you with Taliban. We sorted everything out. What do you want from us? We're hosting your forces. Qatar. Don't forget, the biggest base in the Middle East of the United States is in Qatar. Right? So, why should Hamas compromise, you're asking? Well, in every negotiations, you have to have some sort of compromise. The question is, at what level? There have to be thick lines and red lines when it comes to with negotiations that are primarily to do with protecting the people. And what Hamas are asking for, that's why all of the Palestinian movements are behind them in the negotiations, because they're simply asking for the things that will protect the Palestinian people. Stopping the war completely, allowing people to go back, getting all of the aid in, rebuilding. It's everything that Israel doesn't want to happen. Why? Because Israel wants to destroy the people. It wants this destruction to kill the people, not Hamas. They want to kill everyone in Gaza. And they're still trying to cause a problem in the north. Now, Israel again, it's bizarre, even though previously they already were allowing people to go back to the north and allowed some aid to go back to the north. And by the way, when I'm saying people and allow, mind you, with some massacres on the way and with the basic elements, like people are dying of starvation. But I'm saying something. Because they want to settle. If you listen to Smotrich, to Ben-Gvir, they want to settle in Gaza. They have organizations that push for settlements in Gaza, that tell you we have plans for Gaza. We want to save you. They want to save you over the Palestinian bodies. And Kate, thank you so much for that. Juror number 6 saying, brother, I have not heard much from the Russian Jewish community. Do you know where they stand? Well, the Russian Jewish community, they have a state in Russia. Talk about a Jewish state. Oblast. Go Google Oblast. A Jewish community in Russia. I mean, why should they talk so much? Why should we involve the Jews in what happens with Israel so much? Not related to them. It's imposters acting in the name of Judaism and acting like, they're representing Judaism. There's a difference between Zionism and Judaism. And I don't think Jewish people should be dragged into it for the sake of them being Jewish. Oh, you need to be, and what you... No. Israel is one thing, the Jewish people is another thing. Of course, you will have Jewish people supporting Israel. Of course, you will have Jewish people who are Zionists, but not all of them. And as a matter of fact, in the past 11 months, you've seen that even growing to a level where people have conflicts internally with their families, with their siblings, with their parents, and they're being outcasted. And I spoke with many of them. So I don't think we should be expecting, it's like saying when you have a Christian fundamentalist organization or a Muslim fundamentalist organization, where are the Muslims? Why should I be tracking that? I have nothing to do with them. They are trying to portray it as such, Israel. That's why they'll, you say, I have a problem against the Jewish state and the only Jewish state. No, how do you have a problem against illegal occupation and barbarism and racism and hate and genocide? So a problem. But I don't think it's relevant to try and, drag every like Jewish individual. I mean, bless the Jewish community, they have been very vocal to a level where they want to make sure that they're heard. Why? Because Israel is speaking on their behalf. And I mean, I'd do that. Like if there was a Muslim organization or a Muslim state acting like they represent every Muslim, who are you to represent me? But based on what? Your interpretation? No, thank you. But if you see like many encampments in Europe, in Britain, in America, were formed primarily by Jewish people. They'll tell you, I'm a Jewish person, so not in my name, right? Not in my name. But the media would still ignore them. They would still ignore them. But yeah, I don't think we should like expect or, for communities based on just their religious background. And let's go see if we have anything else. Juror 6 is asking, I asked because Israel seemed to stand behind Ukraine. Israel was hesitant in taking sides when the Russian-Ukrainian war started. Why? Because they have an interest with Russia and they don't want to be seen as a side that goes against its roots. Where are the roots of the Khazarian Zionists? Mostly in Ukraine and, Eastern Europe. So, and there's a big Jewish community, of course, in Ukraine. And Israelis fight with Ukraine, by the way. But Israel also has over 1 million, from Russia and Ukraine, the previous Soviet Union. So you'll find people on both sides. But to Israel politically, they don't want to break all of the tools with Putin because they need him in Syria. Netanyahu and his government, they had open, direct communications with Russia for years. And Netanyahu and his foreign minister at the time, Avigdor Lieberman, who was Belarusian actually, he used to go to Russia regularly to speak with Putin, to speak with the leaders, to coordinate with Syria. Let's make sure we don't have any misunderstanding. We don't want to cause a problem. We don't want any issues. So that started to change when immediately after everything started, when Russia immediately called for a ceasefire. Russia immediately called for a ceasefire. And imagine if everyone listened to Russia, they could have saved all of these lives. If they listened to Russia and China and Brazil, they didn't. Don't forget the vetoes, the US veto, the UK veto, the French veto. Don't forget everyone who vetoed the ceasefire in the beginning and were calling on Israel to have a blockade and starve the people to death. Don't forget that. Don't forget the early days. And then they started to change their tone slightly because they didn't want to face repercussions. But to them, it was a difficult thing. Zelensky's asking them and has been asking them, and lots of licking. Send us weapons and do this and that, and we're Jews like you, have Jewish people, and Russia's attacking the Jewish community here, and also supporting them and saying Hamas are terrorists. Well, you little puppet hypocrite toy. But he's saying I'm occupied and I'm fighting Russia because they're occupying me. Well, Israel's doing the same with Gaza. Why don't you say that? It's because he's hiding his true intentions. His true intentions and his true role. That's why. Otherwise, how can you not support him? At least you would have a position of say, well, I support, which is the moral position, I support the Palestinian people. Like I'll say, I'll support the Ukrainian people. against the war and, you know, their liberty and independence. And couldn't you say that to the Palestinian people? No, Hamas are terrorists, he'll tell you, and we stand with Israel. Shows you his true colors. And he's also trying to appeal to Israel, and Israel started to have a bit more of a harsher tone against Russia, but they also tried to keep it at a minimum. Like one of Netanyahu's closest allies, he warned Russia in the beginning. He said, Russia, be warned, we're coming after you when we finish with Hamas. Israel is going to fight Russia after they finish with, 1 year in, you didn't finish with Gaza. Supposedly the weakest link fighting you, Gaza. So, yeah, I hope that elaborates further. FP saying, have you heard about how Blinken's criticizing Iran of sending ballistic missiles to Russia, and yet they have no problem sending bombs to Israel? Double standards that they sanction Iran. FP, we're living in a hypocrisy festival, a festival of hypocrisy, a circus with many clowns and lots of animals. This is, of course, double standard. You're talking about a genocidal entity. They're supplying them with weapons confirmed to be used against civilians only, by the way. And they're criticizing Iran. You had an agreement with the Russians in the 90s not to go east, right? And you've been breaking it all along and now they're supplying Ukraine with F-16s. Now they're fighting inside of Russia. They're attacking nuclear power plants in Russia too. At the brink of a global war. When is this escalation happen as well? By the way, when did Zelensky order his men to go to Kursk? That was just several months after we almost reached a ceasefire, but the US doesn't want to reach a ceasefire. And that's why they have Zelensky there. Otherwise, the Ukrainians and the Russians, they have no problem. Same people, Ukrainians and Russians, almost. You're talking about a country that they were together under the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union. There's culturally, you know, lots of things in common. And they were about to reach not just a ceasefire, a peace deal. And the Hungarian prime minister was mediating, and we had positive comments like, like Zelensky wanted a ceasefire. Putin was like, no, let's have a total peace treaty. Just let's say where we control or you control, and that's it, get it over and done with. And then what happened? They start to escalate. Why? If you're it's like what Israel is doing in Gaza. They could almost come to reach a ceasefire. All of a sudden they escalate. Who's that serving? The people? Who is that serving? The people in Ukraine or the people in Israel in those two situations? Yeah, and of course, lots of double standards. Lots of double standards and hypocrisy. But I mean, I'm not sure up until when the administration in the United States is going to continue to do this. Who are benefiting from the United States from this ongoing war? And you saw Kamala Harris and Trump, again, a circus, a show to keep you into the two-party system, you know. Oh, there is someone here, you're a socialist and you're a this and you're a whatever it is. That's the same. She's defending Israel. He's saying you hate Israel. And what is that? Both of you are the same when it comes to that. Very minor changes. Why? Because the people who support you are the same. Look where the money goes. Amber, do you think the US and UK saying Iran gave Russian missiles gaslighting us as an excuse to help Netanyahu with his goal towards that war? They always gaslight. That's what they thrive on. Deflection and gaslighting. Deflect, and gaslight. So when you talk about the genocide, oh no, and how can you criticize them and this and that? Deviate. Oh, look at what they're doing. They want to destroy us. They want to kill us. And with them, it's the same. It's like, firstly, you've had an embargo on Iran just because they refuse to be a slave to your system financially and play with your international hegemony plans. Likewise with all of the other states, not just Iran, Venezuela, Latin American countries, any country, anywhere. It doesn't have to be like in the Middle East or whatever from an American perspective. Because from an American perspective, it's our backyard, right? That was Latin America at the time. But then, it's, the whole world is their backyard. And they have the audacity to tell other people what to do. They have 750 bases in 80 countries, the United States, and they're telling you and trying to dictate who helps who and who does what. You have so many forces across the world, and you're spending trillions on them, right? Anyone with a sound mind who knows what's happening in the United States tell you, why am I spending all of that money there? It's not as if I take them back, I'm going to collapse. No, you will be powerful. It's not like the US is collapsing or whatever, unless there's internal problems in the US, like internal civil wars and then states splitting and this and that. These are the problems, and they are genuine. But in terms of a global perspective, it's the global hegemony. And if you listen to the Russians, for example, they always tell you the United States is not willing to accept the fact or deal with the fact or have some sort of an acceptance to a multipolar world. They don't want that. And when do countries do that? They do that when they are collapsing. Usually with the empires, when you're number one, you don't even want a number two. And they're pushing for all of this, all of these wars and all of this blood, unfortunately, at the expense of innocent people everywhere, in Ukraine and in Russia and in Palestine. And they're claiming that they're serving the Israelis. They're killing the Israelis as well. Just to continue this project, this militaristic oligarchy. They tell you the Russians are an oligarchy. You're a militant oligarchy, militaristic oligarchy. The modern day Sparta, if we may have a comparison. So they always do that to try and pretend and portray that they are, of course, the enlightened ones, and the others are the people who they need to modernize and be enlightened. Tom, Mahmoud, what do you know about the Israeli officials saying that Sinwar can leave Gaza so they can have more control over Gaza? Well, Israel offered the Palestinian resistance leaders, they told them, they ordered them previously, Netanyahu and his government, either give in or be executed. This is what Netanyahu told them. Then when they saw they're not going nowhere and they're still fighting Israel, they said, okay, we'll give you a safe passage. We'll give you a safe passage, just leave Gaza. Well, no one's leaving Gaza. But they still have these delusions. That's the thing. Israel is such a high level of arrogance, like the administrations and the governments that support them, extremely arrogant, that they get blinded by this level of arrogance. They become completely detached from the reality because they're like on a high, how dare they fight us or, fight back or stand up against us, the chosen people. How can they do that? Instead of, again, having some sort of a reflection, a review, trying to deal with the problems, historical and contemporary, past and present, and have some sort of a peaceful path for the future, for everyone, between the Jordan River and the sea. No, they want supremacy to be embedded. They want supremacy and racism and now military rule. That's it. What are we talking about? Netanyahu is leading Israel to a full-out Hitler-style state. What are we talking about? So, and that's not working. That's the problem. Okay. Cool. We'll wrap it up there, guys. Okay, thank you so much again, everyone, for tuning in for another live stream. I might have a video after this. Otherwise, I'll have something for you tomorrow. Thank you so much for everyone who participated. Sorry, by the way, if I missed some of your comments. We'll usually miss some of them in the live stream, but all of your input is much appreciated. Thank you so much for everyone who sent supers, the virus, Jalal, 1984, and Francis. Apart from that, stay blessed. Enjoy the rest of your evening or day or night, depending on where you are. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.